Hi, welcome to STEM Stories with Mr. Ewing. This is installment 7 on our journey through a magical unicorn year and exploring what it means to educate through a virtual learning space. We're going to talk about the brain and how it works. And I think it's really, really important that our scholars actually understand and learn about their own brain and how their brain functions. Got a plane flying over, and there goes our dog. How it functions in a classroom or actually for learning. And I think once they learn that, it really empowers them to know how to use their brain. So one of the first things we're going to do, we're going to do a little game of Simon Says. So Simon says, put your hands up. Simon says, put your hands forward. Simon says, put your hands down. Simon says, lift your hands up. Simon says, put your hands together. Pull them apart. How'd you do? Another thing that we can do is actually mirroring. So I'm not going to talk. I just want you to mirror my actions. What we just did was actually help release some of these brain hormones by making a connection, even though I'm not actually really there. I'm in the video, I'm at my own house, but by your mere focusing and mirroring what I'm doing, whether it be Simon Says or just the mirroring game, I actually am encouraging your brain to release happiness hormones. That's why you creating videos, educators creating videos of themselves with the eye contact, making those emotional connections. And I've got a dog under my desk who is scratching at my feet that wants my personal attention, which is helping me to release some of these. But by doing this in a virtual world, you're actually creating a bond with your students. A bond that so many people say, oh, you can't do that in a virtual world. Well, we just did it. Or it's showing images that release these chemicals, these hormones in our brain to help build those connections. So let's talk about what they are. Because in order for us to be learners, we've got to get our brain ready. It's sort of like doing exercises where you warm up. Doing things like this before you start the content learning actually helps students learn better. And explaining to your students why you're doing it. So the first one is dopamine. And dopamine actually, when it's released in our brain, helps us feel pleasure or happiness. And it's a big part of how we think and how we plan. We need that released into our brain so that we're thinking better and we can actually plan better. So by releasing dopamine before you teach a lesson is actually encouraging students' brains to learn better. Oxytocin, this is my favorite. Oxytocin is like a virtual hug. Okay, now in a world where we actually have to be social distancing, we can't hug people, so we have to give a virtual hug. And a way to do that is actually create an environment that makes students feel really good. And that whole mirroring exercise, you feel connected to that person, your student feels connected to you, and it's releasing oxytocin. It's sort of like, I have my teddy bear from when I was a little kid, and every time I see it in my room, a little oxytocin is released in my brain because it brings back that cuddling hormone, that what we call the love hormone, that chemical that is released because we feel loved. And then the last one I want to talk about is endorphins. That also gets released. And if I don't talk about serotonin, I will. Endorphins actually help us reduce pain and boost happiness. We need that. And endorphins get released during that. If you think about like when we're exercising and maybe we're not feeling great during it, but all of a sudden we just start feeling like, oh my gosh, this is working. It's because endorphins are being released. It's the same thing with learning, when learning is happening. So before we get into the amygdala, I want to talk about serotonin. Serotonin actually also gets released in our brains, and that's another chemical that actually helps us feel excited and feel happiness. So the amygdala is a very small piece in our brain, um, tiny, tiny little piece, but all information flows through our amygdala, and the amygdala is going to send it out in different directions. Super important, but the only one that does not memory or piece of information that goes to our amygdala, kind of interesting fact, is smell. That goes straight up to our frontal lobe. Now, the amygdala serves to decipher information and send it where it needs to be, but it's also responsible, and this is why it's super important that students learn this. It's also responsible for the fight, fright, or freeze. Fight, freeze, or flight mode that students get into. And it's something that they can't actually control. And it's really important that they understand that. And if you want to know more about it, do a little bit of research on the amygdala hijack motion. But when students start to understand these things, they actually feel more in control of their learning. It's something that's super important. So here's a really great way of releasing those brain hormones. Look at that cat. Like, look at those eyes. Like, all of a sudden you feel that flood of just feeling pure joy. Knowing the brain, it's really important. Do a little bit of research, teach the parts of the brains, and help students understand how they actually are in control of their brain. They have the power. As Luke Skywalker said in Star Wars, beware of the power of your, or beware of your power, or my power, or something to that effect, but look it up. It's a great saying, and I'm messing it up because my amygdala might be in hijack.